when we're setting up different shots in a movie and when we're moving from place to place, where the sound begins for that scene is really significant. The shot with her pulling the change off of the desk started right on the cut, and that shocked us. It's a surprise. That was an obviously very intentional use of the sound. Suddenly we have a lot of ambience. It's not just the quiet sound of the lights buzzing and her breathing. It's a big noise. And then we go to the computer. Or maybe it was the other way around. I can't remember how the scene was set up. At the computer, when we go in for close-up, we hear close-up sound. We hear the cursor. She's like tapping a key to get that cursor to move up and down. And she's reading, and we have that kind of closer sound. That lends reality to the scene, but it's also like it tells us we're in a slightly different place each time. The sound of the computer begins slightly before the scene, as I recall. It sort of like moves in. It's not as big a shift as the kind of sudden jump in sound when she pulls the change. Just like the sudden jump of sound when she's outside. She's outside, we hear distantly, we hear rain dripping, we hear water moving. We don't know exactly what it is, but there's water dropping. We hear a seagull in the distance. So it's something outside near a coast. And then the first thing that happens is the phone rings. And in surrounds, the phone rings from the back. You know, it's a kind of a trick, right? We get to hear, it's as if from her point of view, we hear the sound in the distance, and then it comes forward into the front speakers. And there's nothing more arresting, right, than a phone. It's like a baby cry. It's like it draws our attention, it draws her attention. And then this whole thing happens on the phone that tells us more about her. The reality of the scene is enhanced by hearing her footsteps. All of her hesitation that we see in her body is conveyed also through the sound of her footsteps moving on that platform, hesitating, twisting slightly. And those are all done after the fact. Those are all Foleyed in. Those are all recorded by somebody else making those footsteps and acting those sounds for us. And then her conversation on the phone, the very fact that she would answer a phone when she's the only one there, tells us something about her. And then what she says, she goes on to actually tell who she is. This is Mulvern Caller, and she spells it out as if that person would have some meaning. And it tells us it's an insight into her character as well. I want to show you a couple of other examples. I want to go to Thin Red Line now, a very different kind of film.
All right, great.
No, I'm going to talk to you now.
Sure.
Okay, the 20th Century Fox logo, the big fanfare. I want to talk about that for a moment because that's how we know it's a movie. You know, there's this big, exciting fanfare. In Mulvern Caller, you saw their logo come up with this kind of like chintzy ice sound. The ice sound is bells, right? They do this kind of chime thing. Part of what happens when you go to a movie is you have to get into the movie space. And that moment before the movie begins is the transition from the world as we know it every day to the world of the movie. And one of the beautiful things about the Fox fanfare is that, oh, the movie's going to start. And we suddenly let go, sit back, and are ready for this thing to happen. Same thing happens with that other logo. Those are actually important elements in building the opening to that film. So here we are with Thin Red Line. As you watch it, the same thing. Listen to what is happening as an ambient sound and what kind of music there is and what kind of effects. And when I'm talking about effects, you know, I'm listening for the sounds that are in the background but are sometimes cued by the way something happens, the way some action takes place on the screen. You'll notice right in the very beginning we have this long, deep bass chord, and you know, it's a classic thing to do with sound. As soon as you hear that kind of sound, you know something dangerous is happening, right? That's the signal. And that's probably something which is hardwired into us, you know, going back millions of years, evolutionarily hardwired in, because the only things that make big bass sounds like that are, you know, thunder, earthquakes, something big rolling towards us, and it's scarier than hell, and so we want to get out of there, or we know something's wrong. And so these big bass sounds affect us very deeply, and they've been used and overused in movies. We have the power to like grab, to use that stuff with subwoofers now in theaters, and you know, it's almost it's cliched at this point. But when it's used effectively, it's really wonderful. So listening to the opening to this, what happens where and how the sound changes with the scenes. Another thing to listen to as you watch this is, you know, what is synced sound and what doesn't have to be synced sound. Where the sound sometimes must be synced to picture, and other times we totally accept it even if it isn't synced to picture, even if it's showing us something that looks like it ought to have a sound attached. Not everything we see in the movies will have a sound attached, and so as we're building and designing sounds, we have to place them in this imaginary space, and we have to decide what's important. We're going to think about these sounds again in terms of levels. We'll think about background, kind of mid-range, mid-ground, and foreground. And we'll build sounds for at least 3 levels and maybe even deeper than that. And our tools are going to be those different kinds of tracks: ambiences, effects, music, dialogue. And with those, we're going to build a reality. But the reality, ambience, birds, air, and there's this great bowed low noise